What's up, fight fans, and welcome back to another MMA Live Before Lock. I am your host, Josh Harris. I'm filling in for Jason Floyd this week. I believe he will be back next week. We are sponsored by PrizePicks. We have a nice giveaway. We'll get to them later. And joining me for the next hour is our resident fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. How you doing, Pete?
What's up, buddy? How are you doing?
Pretty interesting slate today. Not a lot of big names. I feel like if this was like an LFA card, some of these fights are on LFA, you wouldn't really blink an eye. But it is the DFS slate on DraftKings and FanDuel today. It is an interesting card. There are a bunch of massive favorites. I know you and Jason broke down the fights on Thursday. You went fight by fight. We're going to add in some variables. Obviously, the fighters weighed in after that show. There were a couple of guys that looked good, a couple people who didn't look too good. Jessica Andrade making her comeback at strawweight was the first on the scale to make weight. Lando Venata, his first fight at featherweight, he looked a bit drained. And then you had, Felipe Lins in a new weight class making weight. And you had Alexander Romanov coming in a lot lighter than he has for his last few fights. He looked good. So when you're making lineups, do you take any stock into someone looking awful like Lando Venata? Do you lower his... Like, it's funny because you look at the line on that fight and more money has been coming in on Lando Venata, but do you take stock in fighters who look awful on the scale?
I mean, I do. And I also have to take, with a little grain of salt, like you have to be a little bit careful that you don't, put too much weight into the weigh-ins, because we have seen some horrible weigh-ins in the past. And Lando Venata is a guy that I'm backing this week because of the wrestling, especially at the apex, and I think that he can compete on the feet. And I know when he stepped on the scale, he looks extremely lean. And at 155 pounds, he was a little flabby. So I think that this is the ideal weight class for him. But it's not an easy cut, and it's pretty evident that it's not an easy cut. I've seen plenty of fighters look worse than him. But, it's just something to note whenever you see a fighter, have to truly go through a very difficult cut. It's not like Julio Arce levels a couple weekends ago where he's basically, almost passing out on the scale and having his corner has to help him to the scale. And then he's sitting there and he's kind of just like, it looked like the fight was going to be scratched. And then guess what? He came out and he had an absolutely amazing performance. So I take it with a little grain of salt. And if somebody is absolutely drained and pulling an Aspen lad, as we mentioned before the show, then, it's somewhat of a red flag to me. But from what I saw from Lando, that's just it's a guy that really cuts a lot of weight. So maybe in the later rounds, he might somewhat taper off with his output. But, there are some positives from the weigh-ins, as you mentioned, like my boy Romanov looks shredded. And I think that he's going to be an absolute problem. I mean, he was a big guy before. He's definitely toned up and, possibly trying to answer those cardio questions that were surrounding him and his skill set going forward. Outside of that, I thought it was a pretty normal weigh-in, to be honest. You had some fighters get there early. I was always the type of fighter to do that, try to get there and weigh in ASAP so you can rehydrate and have somewhat of an edge. But so I'm excited to see if anything is, materializing from these weigh-ins. Maybe Lando has a terrible performance, but I'm still backing him today.
Yeah, that's an interesting fight. It's one of the more important mid-range fights that we'll get to in a little bit. But let's talk about the main event here. Jessica Andrade coming back down to strawweight to face Amanda Lemos in the main event. And this is an important fight because Jessica Andrade not priced up above 9K. And I think, at 8,900 on DraftKings, it is hard to get away from her because as we've seen in the past, Lemos has extreme power for that division. And she is a much more technical fighter than Andrade. Andrade is more of a brawler. And if you go back and you watch tape on Andrade when she moved up to flyweight against who was it? Her last fight, and she had her chin just up in the air, rushing in. So if she rushes in on Amanda Lemos, which she does, she's a pressure fighter and gets cracked, I could see, Lemos possibly getting her out of there in the first round. But if she can survive the first few rounds, I think she takes over late and, works her way to a late stoppage or a decision victory. So I think this is obviously it's the main event, so it's one of the most important fights on the card. Lemos is probably going to be one of the more popular dogs because they're like, she's 7,300. So how are you approaching this fight? Are you, going all in on a certain fight? Are you stacking them? You're going heavy on Lemos? What's your approach here?
Yeah, so it's as you were mentioning, like there's definitely some defensive mistakes that Jessica Andrade makes on the feet, and it's largely due to crashing distance and not keeping her hands up and not necessarily moving her head the best way that she could. And I can see her just kind of bull rushing into a shot from Lemos for sure. She looked good in a previous performance against Cynthia Calvillo, as you mentioned. I do think that she needs to be careful in round one because Lemos is extremely live to pull off the upset, and that's why she's one of the most popular dogs on the slate, and rightfully so. I mean, not too often do you find knockout artists within women's MMA, and it's just the truth. Women's MMA tends to go the distance more often than not. So that's why when you have a prolific finisher like a Ronda Rousey, even though it was with her judo and jiu-jitsu, like, it's pretty remarkable. And that's where, a Valentina Shevchenko, a Jessica Andrade, Amanda Lemos on any given day that they can get the quick finish. So Lemos is going to be a very popular dog for me. It's tough to get away from, even though that I have more confidence in Andrade over 5 rounds. I think outside of the first 10 minutes, it's Andrade's fight. It definitely is. I think if she implements takedowns from the get-go, it could be a quick night as well. So at that price point, I don't necessarily want to fade this main event. 5 rounds. There's a ton of upside and potential in a situation like this. So I sprinkled Amanda Lemos in just because I feel like the dogs this week, at the bottom, they're pretty ugly, and we'll get to that. And we're on the same page with that. And you're getting a discount for the main event fighter at 8,900. There are tons of amazing 9,000 options, but I think that Andrade has significant potential in comparison to some of the others.
Yep, I agree with that. And I see your super chat, Sam. Thank you for the super chat. I'll get to that in a second. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. It's important. I subscribe, hit the notification button. Sometimes I forget when I'm live, so it reminds me. Sam says, thank you for the $1.99 super chat, by the way. He says, best DK captain and Parsons and Evans odd change. Let's look at the captain slate. Do you play much captain slate on DraftKings?
I do sometimes. It's not necessarily a priority. It's more of like fun money for me when I'm playing the captain slate. And it's if like some of my lineups are immediately dead. Like it's like a fun pivot, it's like a night slate for NBA or baseball. I don't know if they have it for hockey. I'm not a hockey guy. I know you are. So if there's multiple slates, it's fun to kind of just like split some ownership and get a little weird.
Yeah. So looking at the captain's pricing, you have Romanov at 14-1. That's kind of crazy. That's going to hamper your lineup. Tyson Pedro 13-8, Barber 13-2, Andrade 12-9. But then you start going down. You see like Lando Venata under 10K at 9-9. Jordan Wright at 9,300. He has knockout upside. I think, he's a decent captain in GPPs if you're doing that, because he's either going to win inside 7.5 minutes or fade to black after that. So he has nice high upside for GPPs. Who are you looking at for captains?
Yeah. So, I mean, it all comes down to how you think the main event goes, right? If you think that Lemos is going to win, that her price is broken as a captain at 9,000, her price is broken. She's got 5 rounds to work with. And you have crazy finish upside with her as well. If you're not feeling too comfortable with that, the one fight that seems to be discounted in comparison to the others is that Marc-Andre Barriault at 8,200, Jordan Wright at 6,200. So you could roster either one of those guys within your captain spot. It's a fight that's not necessarily predicted to go the distance. They're definitely brawlers, and they definitely have defensive deficiencies. So you could do Barriault at 12-3 or Jordan Wright at 9-3. If you really just wanted to be safe, it's all about the type of player that you are. If you want to be safe, then a Romanov round 1, round 2 finish is pretty likely. So I mean, you're going to be wasting a ton of your salary. But perhaps he has some of the best potential on this captain slate. So that's kind of where I would be focusing my attention. I wouldn't be getting too cute or too cheap. Like I wouldn't be putting like a Villanueva or a Sherman or something like that. I just don't think that you need to punt in a situation like that. There's so much upside, and you could be somewhat left out if you do not have some of these top end fighters.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those top end fighters. You're looking on DraftKings right now, we have Alexander Romanov at 9,600. It's rare you see someone at 9,600, but he is the most trustworthy fighter, in my opinion, in the 9K range. You have Romanov at 9,600, Dean Barry at 9,500, Tyson Pedro at 9,300, Aori Kuilang at 9,100, and Macy Barber at 9K. So I see a lot of people in the chat saying like they want to fade Romanov because he's not going to pay off at his price. But if you do fade Romanov, like there isn't many trustworthy fighters in that range. Dean Barry, I don't know why this is a fight in the UFC right now. He's finished his wins in the first round, but like his opponents have like 6-30 records that they weren't great. You have Tyson Pedro. In theory, he should walk through Ike Villanueva, but he hasn't fought in 4 years. Aori Kuilang is an interesting option. He's had a nice camp. He's 0-2 in the UFC, so I don't think he's going to be very popular, but I think he has the sneaky upside in that price range. And Macy Barber, by default, like we talked about before the show, Montana De La Rosa being super popular because he's the cheapest dog that you can quote unquote trust. So I think from a contrarian standpoint, Macy Barber might be a sneaky option. But if you are going to fade Romanov, who are you looking to in this price range?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, man. And props to you for stepping in and filling in for Jason. We appreciate you. I know that chat is surprised, but man, you're doing good. And, I know that you're an avid MMA fan, so it just works. It's nice. But as far as like the paying up for the studs, Romanov, we've seen him inside the UFC, right? And we've seen how dominant he can be, especially in a division like that. And we know that overpowering wrestlers with top game and vicious ground and pound and submission skills is somewhat broken for DraftKings. And that's why he's in like a league of his own at the top. And I think that he's, the 9,600 is well-deserved. Dean Barry, there are just so many, he's facing the worst fighter on the roster right now. But there are so many uncertainties surrounding him as well. And he's a karate point fighter. And that doesn't necessarily mean knockout action immediately. It could be a point fight, exactly what it says. Dancing on the outside, picking apart his opposition, just kind of using footwork, evasiveness, in and out movement, and winning rounds, banking rounds. He's a liability on the mat. Not really sure if Mike Jackson has a ground game. That doesn't look like he does from the fights that we have seen. But if Mike Jackson were to have a fight in the UFC, he'd want it to be a striking fight. He's had kickboxing fights in the past. His hands really aren't all that bad. His striking defense is it's terrible. His head is straight up in the middle. His chin's straight up in the air. But offensively, his hands don't look all that bad. So like that's a spot where we're trying to look at these 9,000 options. Who can lay an egg and not necessarily come through at that salary range, or who could be upset in a situation like that? I don't see Sherman beating Romanov. Even if Sherman's on his bicycle, just trying to run away from him, I just don't see it. Jackson, I think I said it yesterday on Twitter. I said, imagine if Dean Barry has like a Max Roshkopf debut where you're just automatically expecting dominance. And then he comes in here and he's met with some resistance, and he's a pretty green fighter as well. And we saw that yesterday on the Bellator undercard where Ray Cooper's brother, absolute stud, was facing a guy making his pro debut and dominated the first 2 rounds, started to get put into submissions and made an amateur mistake. And that's where like a low level fight between Barry and Jackson, I'm not really putting a lot into that at 9,500. I'd much rather take Tyson Pedro, on the layoff against the guy who's been knocked out repeatedly, against the guy who has 0 ground game. So I know that there's some uncertainties and question marks surrounding Tyson Pedro, but he would be my second guy within that range. Like Dean Barry in actuality should go out there and just get rid of Jackson pretty early. But, I don't know. I hate banking on things when it's such green fighters.
Yeah. And you mentioned how Mike Jackson might be the worst fighter. Like Ike Villanueva is honestly just there to be
he's a close second
fighters.
Yeah, he's a close second.
Yeah, like let's see here. Like he has 1 win in the UFC, and it was against Vincinius Moreira. I forgot how to pronounce his name, but like that guy, you sneeze on him and he gets knocked out. So like he's lost. All of his losses are by knockout. You know, Tyson Pedro doesn't have, you know, pure knockout power, but if he gets him to the mat, like a submission is live there. So I kind of agree there that Tyson Pedro would be the second option outside of Romanov. And I think, like, you know what you're going to get from Romanov. He's going to just crash in there and take Sherman down. You saw Chase Sherman get submitted by Jake Collier, who's a bloated middleweight, but he has good movement for heavyweight. So you're going to see, you know, Romanov, he, in theory, should get him out there pretty quickly. So I think, you know, paying up for, like, if you're building lineups, 150, something like that, you don't just click the lock button. When you have the salary left in there, you put him in. You know what I mean? Like, he would be the guy I put in.
And oddly enough, like, as like bad of a fighter Mike Jackson is, he has been away from the cage for some time, and he could possibly be improving. He's a part of a decent camp. So we just don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm going to get to him in just like a very, very small amount of lineups, even though his recent run in the UFC was horrible. I don't really know too much about his opponent at high level. So it's just like, this guy's made the walk twice. He has that UFC experience. Octagon jitters are a real thing, and we see it all the time. On any given day, an upset can occur. So like Mike Jackson to take like an absolute long shot flyer, I'm doing it in like 1-2 lineups, just because the salary allows me to get to, you know, at least 2 of these 9,000 studs that I have a ton of confidence in.
Yeah. And he's probably the guy I'd look to if I had to go under Montana De La Rosa. But we'll get to that bottom range in a second. Get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. Of course, if you're only looking to play MMA DFS, then you can sign up for one of our Awesemo Plus MMA packages for as low as $2.95 weekly. Please note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and can be easily be added with these packages at checkout, but it is not included in our base package. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. And I will say, if you are an MMA player, get that Fantasy Cruncher.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely valuable.
Absolutely. It's really helpful, especially like when I have a ton of confidence in some high-end options. You can create a group. You can also create like a long shot pool, something that I like to do to somewhat get, you know, exposure and kind of make sure that I'm not duplicating lineups with my hand builds.
Yeah. And sometimes my ego gets in the way, and I forget that maybe the machine is smarter than I am. So they'll pump out a lineup that I will never get to because I have an ego. But, you know, that's for neither here nor there. Let's get to the mid-range. There are some important fights here. I guess we'll go from like 8,600 down to 7,600 here. We talked about the main event. So we have Marc-Andre Barriault against Jordan Wright, Charles Jourdain against Lando Venata, Marcin Prachnio against Felipe Lins, Sergey Kanzagando against Davy Grant. I just butchered that name. I know I did. I know how to pronounce it, but here we are. Then we have Clay Guida against Claudio Puelles, and Evan Elder against Preston Parsons. So it's kind of tough. Like, if you're putting in Romanov, and I was messing around with building lineups for a few days now. So if you put in, like, you start with Romanov and then you put in Jessica Andrade, it's really tough to get in like a Marc-Andre Barriault or Charles Jourdain. You really have to go down into like the Clay Guida fight or the, you know, Preston Parsons fight. And I look at this mid-range because I do like building mid-range lineups, and you said you like to as well sometimes on slates. You look at this Clay Guida Claudio Puelles fight, and it just screams low scoring. Like, Guida's going to be on his bike. If he does get Puelles down, like, Puelles, you know, is going to roll for a knee bar, but like, he has 2 knee bar finishes in UFC, but that's not a submission that you can rely on when you get to even the middle ranks and the like I know Clay Guida has issues with his submission defense, but I feel like if you get put into a knee bar, you're going to take big shots. And I think Clay Guida might be able to capitalize on that. That being said, I think it's going to be lower scoring. So I think if I'm going to go into the mid-range, it's going to be that Elder Parsons fight.
Yeah, so that 8,100 fight is just like, it's going to be a natural pivot for a lot of people because the 8,000, 8,200 fight tends to make it into the optimal lineup just because the roster flexibility that it allows you. But on a week like this where it could possibly be low scoring as predicted, people would just rather pivot to that 8,100 fight, and it's on last minute notice. So we have Preston Parsons, who originally had an opponent, and Evan Elder stepping in on short notice. So, you would imagine that, Evan Elder was training for a fight in a week or two. So all you do is he's in camp, and now he just changes the date of his fight, and he'll be stepping up on short notice. So this isn't a guy that's coming in completely unprepared. I have exposure on both sides. I think that there's grappling upside with Parsons being a natural welterweight, whereas Elder is a former lightweight and has, dabbled in welterweight from time to time. Sometimes fighters will take, fights on a weight class higher just because it's short notice or whatnot. And that's a situation like this. So I think that Parsons is the more natural welterweight. Both strong camps. Elder would probably have that advantage coming from Sanford MMA. It's just a fight where I kind of just view it the same. Like I'm okay with getting to either one. I got Elder with KO upside, and I have Parsons with grappling and finish upside. So I've seen Parsons in the octagon, so it's a slight lean towards him. But this is a fight where, if I'm looking at ownership, it is going relatively owned. And if people are glossing over it, I feel like it might be a mistake.
Yeah. Do you put any stock into Elder being a lightweight moving up to welterweight?
In a way, I do. Because jumping up a weight class is twofold. You aren't going to have to cut weight, which is beneficial, especially if it's on short notice, because taking a short notice fight and then having to kill yourself to make the scale, the first fight shouldn't be against the scale. The only fight that you should have is in the octagon. And a lot of people struggle with that. So he's going to have that advantage where he's not having to kill himself to make the weight. So that's really good for Evan Elder. From a grappling and strength side, he could be at somewhat of a disadvantage. So you would imagine the Parsons been training with bigger guys and accustomed to bigger bodies. He's going to be the stronger, whereas, Evan Elder's quicker. So, I mean, it's a give and take for both. I can make an argument for either way. It being on short notice with a full training camp for Parsons, that's why I'm leaning in his direction.
Let's talk about the two other mid-range fights that are kind of important, in my opinion. I think one of the more popular fights is going to be Charles Jourdain against Lando Venata. And then we have Marc-Andre Barriault against Jordan Wright, who has not gone past the 16-second mark in the second round in his UFC career. Looking at the ownership projections, I thought Barriault, because he's kind of been priced in no man's land, would have been lower owned, but he's coming in as the sixth highest owned fighter per Awesemo ownership projections. I feel like Jordan Wright coming in at 25% is an interesting play because he has KO upside, and there aren't many dogs that you can really trust. And that if Jordan Wright wins, it's going to be by early KO. And then you look at the Lando Venata fight. That fight is actually favored to go the distance, but I feel like Lando Venata, he is a wrestler. Not many people know that. And if he comes in with a wrestling heavy game plan here, he attempts 4 to 6 takedowns, I feel like he has sneaky upside that not many people know about.
Yeah, so I mean that's what I'm predicting for Lando, is that he's just going to lace up his wrestling shoes in a situation like this, where the clear Achilles heel of Charles Jourdain is his lack of wrestling. He's a dangerous striker. He shells up at times and can get hit and treated like a punching bag at times. But Lando Venata is pretty hittable as well. The X factor would be the wrestling and the grappling. And I've seen that on full display in training and in the cage, that Lando Venata can definitely do that and go to that well if he needs to. He's done it against Bobby Green in the past in their first encounter, landing 4 takedowns. So if he does anything close to that against Charles Jourdain, you would like that, you would imagine that he could, have some significant upside. And I think that's where a lot of, people are naturally going to be looking for. I always do, at least. I look for wrestlers within, under $8,000. And that's where you have Lando Venata. You also have Montana De La Rosa, where they have takedown upside with submission skills as well. Like if you tell me that Lando Venata submits Charles Jourdain, okay, it's not really that shocking, to be honest. Charles Jourdain is patching that hole, but it's a work in progress, and he's kind of learning on the job. It's a very difficult thing to do at the high level.
Yeah, and this is his debut, I believe, at featherweight, or maybe in a few years. He may, if he gets rehydrated and all that. I mean, obviously he has about 30 plus hours after the weigh-ins to deal with that. If he does have the gas tank, I think one of the problems with Venata with the gas tank was he loved those high energy moves, like the spinning back kicks and the round, like all that stuff. Like he almost knocked out Tony Ferguson. So he kind of, it's like, you know what, I can knock people out in the UFC, and he gets those high energy moves. But I feel like if he can get his wrestling game going, it's a lot tougher for the guy getting wrestled cardio wise than being in top position working your game. So
yeah, getting ragdolled is exhausting. So I would agree with you and say that Lando will be fine as long as he finds success with those takedowns. The second you start getting met with resistance and getting takedowns defended, that's exhausting in itself. So that there's levels to it. And I thought that Lando in his previous fight, where he actually did make his debut at 45 against Mike Grundy, a pretty talented wrestler. He looked pretty good. He passed the eye test for me. So that's where I will say, okay, I think that this is the weight class for you. And I think that he could have a strength advantage over most of the division, where he had success at 155 pounds. So I agree with you. I think that, as long as he's in top position, he's okay.
I have a super chat from St. Stephen 68. Thank you for the $4.99 super chat. It says, "Hey guys, great job. You make MMA analysis entertaining, even for non-MMA guys like me. Right on."
Appreciate it, brother. That. Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the support. We like winning money, and of course, I'm passionate about MMA. I know Josh really likes it as well, in addition to hockey. And I really think the COVID era really put MMA in the UFC in the spotlight, and it's really gained a ton of popularity. So I'm just happy you guys like the sport that we enjoy so much. Yeah,
Fight Island during the initial shutdown was the only thing going on. The GPPs were so big, and
yes,
MMA DFS honestly is the cleanest sweat in DFS. You know what you need when you need it. It's not like chaos like MLB or NBA, stuff like that. Everything going on at once. There's one fight going on at a time. So you know what you need when you need it.
It's tilting though. It's tilting when you have an amazing lineup and then it just doesn't come through, because it's fun because maybe what you predicted before, or who you thought was going to win, and you're like, oh my God, I have like the best lineup if this underdog comes through. So it's like, hey, I wouldn't mind this, you know what I mean? And it's just fun to sweat. And MMA is the craziest sport, and that's why we see variance so much and so often in comparison to other predictable sports where you got fighters, and where you have baseball players with all the metrics, and basketball players what their averages are, and how many rebounds they get per game, and the fantasy point. It's difficult for MMA because styles make fights. And if you take more shots on dogs in MMA, you'll probably be a little bit more profitable.
Yeah, and that's why you gotta. It's one of those things like the other DFS sports. You have machines pumping out numbers and this and that. MMA is the one you really have to watch, because like you said, styles make fights, and some of the stats could be misleading. Like the one I saw people arguing about a lot on Twitter recently was Aljamain Sterling, Peter Yan, the first fight. Sterling had more significant strikes, but if you watch that fight, Yan was landing the more impactful strikes. So it's one of those where you really have to watch, and it's fun to watch. So
absolutely.
Let's talk about our our awesome sponsor, PrizePicks. Not legal yet in New Jersey, but they're working on it. So get 1 month free of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up using the link in the description of the video and make a deposit at PrizePicks. You'll receive an email within 24 to 48 hours after to redeem your free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You can use promo code Awesemo for $100 first match deposit bonus. So what it is you kind of just pick props. You can 10x your money. So since, I don't have PrizePicks, I just straight up bet props. I write the UFC betting article weekly. It's free on the site. So I actually did bet a couple props. One was a bit risky. I have Barber and De La Rosa not going the distance. It was almost plus 200. But I feel like, we'll talk about that fight right now. You see Barber against De La Rosa. I kind of feel like it could be similar to the Macy Barber Robertson fight. De La Rosa has some better striking than Robertson, but you saw like Macy Barber just fury her up against the cage and just get her out of there. I feel like Macy Barber has some sneaky finishing upside, and if she doesn't, I think Montana De La Rosa does have some sneaky submission upside, because if you watch Macy Barber's last fight against Miranda Maverick, she doesn't accept bottom position. She tries to scramble up, and in a transition, maybe you can see Montana De La Rosa finding the back. So I think it is a sneaky. I think Barber is a sneaky play, and she's definitely going to be well owned in the top range today.
Yeah, I think it's a leverage play for sure, because of the 9,000 options, she's probably the least attractive. Women's MMA tends to go the distance, as we mentioned. She's been somewhat inconsistent throughout her UFC tenure. So, people want big scores. And Macy Barber, in some of, in her first 3 fights, she scored 110 over Hannah Cyphers. That was a second-round knockout. 92 against J.J. Aldridge, second-round knockout. 105 against Jillian Robertson, first-round knockout. In a split decision loss against Miranda Maverick, which she only scored 54. And in her 2 decision defeats, she against Alexa Grasso scored 38 and 27. So it's not really like you have eye-popping numbers. I think that this is a leverage spot on the slate. You know that she's been working at Team Alpha Male on trying to patch that, take down the fence, and get in top position and avoid giving her back. And because as far as grappling, I don't think that she's a savvy grappler. If this is just a grappling contest, I think Montana De La Rosa waxes her in a way. But this is MMA, and punches are going to be thrown. And anytime that you hit and punish somebody trying to take you down, it makes them second guess things, and they somewhat get sloppy. So I would say that that's an interesting fight to target, and one where the underdog will be flying a lot higher owned than the favorite, which is always interesting, because it's just like naturally lineup construction is kind of making it difficult to get the Macy Barber. But that's where, you look at these 9,000 options and you rank them. And that's where Arichi Lang and Macy Barber are kind of like the lost in the shuffle of the top 3 ones. Yeah, and Montana De La Rosa has never been finished in the UFC, and in her 2 losses, she scored over 40 DK points. So she seems like she has a safe floor according to the game logs, but you can't really trust that. Arichi Lang is interesting because he's at that fight ready camp, and I know he had 2 losses in UFC. He kind of got wrestled pretty bad by Tyler. I wanted to say Tyler Durden, Fight Club, Cody Durden. And then that Jeffrey Molina fight, he was in that fight for the 2 rounds. And then Jeffrey Molina in the 3rd round just went absolutely nuts, landing 129 significant strikes. But I feel like being at that camp, fight ready with all those guys, I think, and then he's fighting Cameron Else, who just got absolutely demolished by Kyler Phillips. And I was looking at Else has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I guess not all black belts are created equal. He looked out of the water there, but I think he's another good target today. Yeah. So, I mean, for the most part, whenever you have fighters coming out of fight ready, you know that they're going to be prepared. They got Eddie Cha for their striking, is the Korean Zombie striking coach, and he's really helped out a lot of fighters. You also have the Cejudo. You just an entire room full of strong wrestling. You're going to go to fight ready, and you're either going to elevate your wrestling, or you're going to learn how to wrestle better. And I think that's where, you know, Richie Lang, he's not a good wrestler, but he's at a camp where he can, you know, develop a strong takedown defense, even implement takedowns in the past. We have seen him do that. And we know that he's durable and he can get into war. So I do think that there is some intrigue with the underdog and Cameron Else. This is a week where like I'm taking like solo shots on some of these long shots. And like I have a lineup or two with Cameron Else just because he's a big guy. He hits really hard. If he is sneaky with some chokes, I know that he can hit some anaconda and Darce chokes. If a Richie Lang, you know, falls into a bad position, gets tired, a lot of things can happen. And Cameron Else hits really hard, but I can actually see a Richie Lang getting rid of him pretty quickly here, to be honest. You know, I just think that there's levels. I don't think that either one of these guys are all that great, but I think that a Richie Lang is going to make this look like a mismatch. So I'm targeting this as a sneaky fight. If this gets stretched out and goes 15, I don't think that it has the volume or the capability of like smashing and becoming optimal. I think it's optimal if there's a quick finish. So this is a sneaky round one prop bet type of stuff where you could be targeting either side, and it might be a violence play.
Yeah, that fight is minus 240 to not go to decision. So Vegas is expecting a finish in that fight, and quickly. Let's talk about a fight that is pretty important on this card. There is potentially going to be some knockouts here. Fight not going to decision here is minus 230. It's Jordan Wright, Marc-Andre Barriault. Jordan Wright, the Beverly Hills Ninja. He either wins by knock. He's a kill or be killed guy. He has, you know, his offensive skills are very good. His defensive skills, very bad.
Mm-hmm.
He lands over 8 significant strikes per minute, but he also absorbs a ton of strikes per minute. Now, Marc-Andre Barriault, not a, you know, avid finisher, you'd say, in the UFC, but I feel like if this got into the second round, Jordan Wright, he survives the barrage from Jordan Wright. I feel like he could be live for a second or third round finish. And I think at 8,600 in the mid range, a second round finish could find him on the optimal lineup.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I wish Barriault had a full training camp, because if Barriault had a full training camp, I think that it would take a little bit of the variance away. I also think that if Barriault didn't have a horrible performance against Chidi and Njokuani, we would see this line a much wider than it is right now. I think that Jordan Wright is one of the best underdogs on the slate from a round one standpoint of getting a knockout. I just don't trust either one of their chins. I'm getting to Jordan Wright. I don't feel good about it. I'm getting to him quite often just because of the upside within that slate. I think that this is a fight that doesn't go the distance. I can see Barriault even pressing him against the cage, similar to how he has in the past. But I could see that resulting in a finish as well. So we'll have to see. It's a violence play for sure. And there are some other fights within this range where they could get stretched out. But man, I don't know. I don't see that going 15 minutes.
Yeah, Jordan Wright has never gone past the 7.5 minute mark in his career, in or outside the UFC. So, you know, he's going to go for it. He'll fight for your money for half the fight, and then, you know, he'll give it his all. And then, you know, in that range as well, I think a sneaky fight is Marcin Prachnio, who's somehow still a favorite in the UFC, against Felipe Lins.
Uh-huh.
So, like, Lins is coming down from heavyweight. He won the PFL heavyweight, I think it was 2 years ago, something like that, 3 years ago, $1 million fighter, you know, won the $1 million, comes into the UFC, has 2 fights at heavyweight, loses decision to Andrei Arlovsky, ugly fight.
Yep.
Then he got knocked out by Tanner Boser. Now he's dropping down to 205 to go against Marcin Prachnio. And I see in the projections, the ownership projections, that Felipe Lin's not going to be super high owned. And it's just because Marcin Prachnio has not been knocked out in the first round the past few fights. It's happened. Like, you connect on that chin, he's going to go down. So I feel like Felipe Lins is a nice, like, he's on some betting sites, he's minus 105 underdog. So at the price of 7,800 on DraftKings, he has some tremendous value, and he does, I believe, have KO upside.
Yeah, so I like Felipe Lins, and I've liked him in his debut, and I also thought that, you know, this guy was going to be something for this division. I didn't think that he was going to be somewhat of a disappointment, and he's been a really, really disappointing signing. It's what happens when you get paid, and you got paid so well that you can somewhat lose an edge. And even being a part of a strong camp and American top team, you can lose that hunger. I think that this is a winnable matchup. If he loses to Marcin Prachnio, I think he's going to see the door. I really think so. And I think that, Marcin has looked better. The win against the win against Khalil Roundtree has really aged well. And you have seen him, get hurt in his previous fight against Ike Villanueva. I'm not a big Ike guy at all. Like, I think that Ike's pretty horrible. And Ike, if you go back and you watch, Ike was pressing him back, hitting him with some big shots. And I didn't like the body language. And body language can really tell you a lot in a fight. And that's where live betting comes in. And Ike looked like he was going to put him out of there relatively quickly until Prachnio kind of, weathered the storm, came out, and then landed a beautiful body kick. But he was hurt multiple times. And if Ike Villanueva is hurting you on the feet, I have confidence that Felipe Lins, despite a horrible chin, I feel like Felipe Lins is going to be that under 8,000 knockout guy that we need this week. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I mean, who else are you going to really trust on a slate like this? This is a horrible fight card. You can gain an edge on the field, but as far as like viewing, it's a horrible fight card to view. I'll be taking shots all day long, fight by fight, just betting on the fights. And that's where I think that you'll be profitable today.
Yeah, I'm a big live bettor. There's so much edge to be had in between the first and second rounds.
Oh my God.
Live betting. If you are quick and your ESPN Plus feed isn't behind because, sometimes streaming not too great, but if you have a good feed, man, it is very profitable to live bet. And I see a $10 super chat from Doug. He says, thank you very much, Doug. He says, Lando Venata or Jordan Wright in cash. Thanks, guys. For me, it's easy. It's Lando Venata. He has a much higher floor. Jordan Wright may win by knockout, but if he doesn't, he's not going to score well at all. So Venata for me all day. What about you?
Yeah, Doug, thank you so much for the support. We appreciate that a lot. For cash, you're looking for safety and security, and that's where Venata with a grappling upside comes into play. If Wright loses, it could be single digits. So I think the easy play for cash would be Lando Venata.
Agreed there. So let's talk about the Awesemo Hall of Fame real quickly.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So we have an Awesemo Hall of Fame. Obviously, all you got to do, it's not very easy. That's why it's called the Hall of Fame. You got to have the Awesemo Avi or Avatar. You got to finish in top 3 of a contest with 5,000 people or more. Tag the winner or tag Awesemo HOF on Twitter with your win. You win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You can only win once, so it's not like you can stack. If you're like a baller and you win all the time, you can't win a free year. It's just 1 month for the year. So we had a couple wins. I can't even see Tyler's screen.
Here,
they're going
you.
to the winners now.
I'll call them out for you. I can read them better.
There you go. I see
Gene with an absolutely absurd parlay. That's plus like 12,000 odds. I'm not sure what you're doing there, Gene, but good job. 25 cents into 300. We got our boy Cody here taking down 10K in the MLB squeeze. We got Tito Papito taking down 62K in, I don't know, I'm guessing NBA. And the classic Dave DeRimmer with another Hall of Fame entry. First place in the PGA Flop Shot. Good to see Dave. Oh, well, speak of the devil, it's Dave again. And, yep, he won in NBA also. Good job. And then we got our boy Scotty here at the end taking down first. And shout out the cookie pack. I don't know what that means or what I just said, but good job, guys.
Shout out to the cookie pack. Thank you, Tyler, for reading that for me. It did pop up on the screen after you started, but you were rolling, so I let you roll. So make sure to give us a like and subscribe, man. I appreciate all the support. Pete appreciate it as well. He said he appreciates it. So I see 300 of you in chat. Make sure you hit the like button. It helps us out a lot, man. It lets us do these free shows. So like and subscribe. It's really good. Let's talk about these punts today, and wow, there is not much there. We've kind of touched on it a little bit here, like the The popular ones are going to be Amanda Lemos, KO upside, Montana De La Rosa, grappling upside. But then you have, like, if you go below Montana De La Rosa, Cameron Ellis, Ike Villanueva, Mike Jackson, Chase Sherman, these are guys that, you know, it's MMA, anything can happen. Like, we've seen some ridiculous things happen in MMA, but these are 4 fighters that you would think are guys that you need the other fighter to make a big mistake. Like, they don't have like a clear cut path to victory. And you talked about how, like, you kind of hinted at it earlier that Mike Jackson would be the guy that you're going to take the shots on in that. And I kind of agree. Like, it's just, he frees up so much salary, and you watch that fight against CM Punk, and that was just such a meme fight. Like, he couldn't get CM Punk out of there. It looked like he wasn't trying towards the end there, but like, there's just so many question marks on Dean Barry. Like Chase Sherman, like, I liked when he was fighting. What was it? It was like some like island fight promotion in a boxing ring in the middle of like the tropics. He looked pretty good there, but like fighting Romanoff, like, unless like he could survive to the 3rd round and Romanoff absolutely gasses out, it doesn't seem like he's live at all. Ike Villanueva, like, outside of Tyson Pedro getting hurt, I don't see path to victory there. So like I feel like this is a range where these 4 fighters are going to be like under 5%. And I kind of agree that if I had to take a shot, it would probably be on Mike Jackson.
Yes, I mean, if we're talking the 6K options, it's Chase Sherman, Mike Jackson, Ike Villanueva. Like, I'll take a shot on the unknown Mike Jackson, who's been away from the cage for a little bit. And when I say take a shot, I mean like a few lineups, not a large majority at all, like probably less than 10% of your lineup, just because there's so many unknowns surrounding him and his opponent. And this is a matchup where, like, he could showcase his striking skills, where he has, you know, had Thai fights and kickboxing fights in the past. I don't think he's good still. So, you know, tread carefully. I would much rather find $400 and go to Cameron Else, even though that there's, you know, it's a tough matchup. He at least has a true skill set where he has a grappling upside with submission skills. He wings shots. I don't think he's durable. I feel like he's going to get taken out of there, but at least it's going to be a competitive fight. And he's not a massive underdog, where you're talking about the first 3 options. Chase Sherman's plus 900, Mike Jackson plus 700, Ike Villanueva plus 450, Cameron Else plus 191. I'd much rather like get to find that salary to get to Cameron Else. It just makes a lot of sense. But yeah, beneath Montana De La Rosa, it's Cameron Else. And, you know, Montana De La Rosa is naturally going to be everybody's darling this week, just because of her grappling upside, her floor, and the fact that this could be a winnable matchup for her. So, you know, be careful. The lineups are going to be weird this week, and I'm going to be taking shots on some fighters I have literally no faith in, but it just frees up so much salary, as you mentioned, Josh.
Yeah. And Mike Jackson got taken down by CM Punk.
Oh my God,
like,
exactly.
He does not want to be on the mat. Does not want to be on the mat. But I see another super chat from Sam Pierce, 199 super chat. Thank you very much. Lemos on championship weight to send a message. Yeah, and I think if she wins by emphatic knockout, you're going to see her in title contention. Maybe her next fight, or maybe one more fight after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, finding salary to get to Lemos, like I always say, naturally prioritize main event and co-main event underdogs. They're some of the best in the world. And we saw Peter Yan, Aljamain Sterling, like Sterling's price was ridiculously low. I didn't have all that much faith in him to pull off the fight against Peter Yan. But you're talking about, let's say, like the number 1 and number 2 fighters in the world on any given night, you know, especially when this game is so mental and you don't know so many things going into a fight. Like, you know, Andrade could be nursing an injury, whereas Lemos is feeling the best she's ever felt, and she has the skills to do it. And we've seen her just completely, you know, just annihilating opposition. And, you know, I know she didn't look good in her previous fight against Angela Hill, but her price is somewhat broken. If this, you know, if she's able to keep it on the feet, you like the fight even more for her. It's just her gas tank that's super suspect.
Yeah, and you mentioning that this fight card is pretty bad. Are you considering possible, because like it might be, you might see the winning lineup not have 6 wins on it.
Yeah.
So are you considering possibly stacking some fights and GPPs in your
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, come on, Josh, in chat saying how fast do I beat CM Punk? Stop it. That's ridiculous. Secondly, I actually hate stacking, and this is a week where I feel like everybody loves stacking 5-round fights, and I feel like people might be getting away from it this week. So I feel like it's a contrarian take to stack it because of Lemos's cardio questions. One that kind of sticks out to me, Josh, is where like you had Rafael dos Anjos fighting Renato Moicano, and he took the fight on short notice. And I took Rafael dos Anjos inside the distance because I'm like, dude, there's no way Renato Moicano survives 25 minutes. And guess what? He survived, and he actually scored pretty decent because he started to have like a little resurgence, as the fight went later. A situation like that could happen. So I'm okay with stacking on this week just because the options are so ugly at the bottom.
That was a tough beat. That ref could have stopped that fight.
Oh my God.
Took a beating.
So many. He must have had money on going the distance or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So, hey, just to mention again, PrizePicks is our sponsor. We love PrizePicks. It actually is really fun. I hope it is legal in New Jersey soon. I'd love to play some PrizePicks. I see people on Twitter all the time. You don't have to stick to one sport. You can go multi-sport. It's awesome. Coming up after us, we have MLB Live for Lock at 6:30 Eastern with Terry and Gundacker. So looking forward to that. I think we touched on almost everything here. Is there anything else on this card that you want to mention?
Yeah, so I just want to ask you a question. I want to see if your head's at the same spot that mine is. I always ask Jason, who the hell are we not talking about? And also, what fight, if you had to put your finger on it, which fight do you really not have a lot of exposure to? Or you just kind of skipping past? Because I'll tell you what my fight is, and it's the Dwight Grant Sergey Kondashko fight that I'm constantly just scrolling either above or below it. And I don't know if that's what everybody's doing this week, but I find myself doing it more often than not. And could it be a mistake? It might be. I don't know. We'll have to see.
That is also the fight I'm kind of scrolling past. Dwight the Body Snatcher Grant hasn't been snatching many bodies lately, but I don't know. Sergey, he lost to Rustam Kabalov, and that's not a bad loss. You know what I mean? Like that guy is a tough out in the UFC, but like I feel like that fight's gonna be a slow paced striking affair. Same with Clay Guida, Claudio Ples. I don't think I'm talking about Ples enough. Like,
yeah,
I feel like that's the guy, but at the same time, like, could we see this fight go to decision and the winner have 68 DK points? Yes. Claudio Ples catch Guida in a submission and end up on the optimal lineup? Yes. So like,
yeah, I say it every time Guida's on the card. And I just want to say it again. When I was out training in New Mexico and Guida took the fight against Anthony Pettis, there were too many people within Jackson Wink that had any belief in Clay Guida to pull off that victory, because we're like, standing, he's screwed. If it hits the mat, you have Pettis with amazing jiu-jitsu, good triangles, good arm bars, all that good stuff. And in training, Guida has a susceptibility of getting caught in submissions over and over and over. So that's definitely an Achilles heel for him. You saw it in the Jim Miller fight. I feel like he's improved upon that, and he noticed it's a weakness. So, anytime you have a guy who's comfortable being in top position, you have to be a little uncertain whether they can avoid, getting put in a submission, because it's really quick. And Playlist, if he does anything well, it's that he's a submission Hail Mary type of artist. And this could be a situation where he just catches Guida coming in on a double leg takedown with a guillotine, and it's a wrap. But I say more often than not, Guida's just a little too wise to everything that Puelles does today.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at Clay Guida, the last two guys to submit him, Jim Miller and Charles Oliveira.
Yeah,
much better submission grapplers than Claudio Puelles.
Good company.
Oliveira, obviously the champ. Jim Miller, one of the best round one submission prop guys in the UFC. Yeah, I don't know. And you'd have to go back to like 2009. Like you look at his Tapology, he hasn't been submitted since like 2009 before that. So like getting submitted by Jim Miller and Charles Oliveira, not the worst losses in the world. Those guys are submitting everybody when they win. So I don't know. Claudio Plus, like I said earlier, rolling for knee bar Hail Mary submissions is not a sustainable thing in the UFC.
Yeah, it's a bad ground and pound position, as you mentioned. Yeah. So Guida could end up getting a TKO today, and he could be the guy we're not talking about. I mean, he's priced super, super cheap, and he has more fights than this kid could even dream of at this point. So experience means a lot in the UFC, especially at high level. And, it's contract talks time for Clay Guida. I don't think that they're going to necessarily renew it, but, a little motivation doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I think Claudio Puelles, I haven't really watched his footwork too much, but Clay Guida is always moving. And if Puelles is chasing him instead of cutting him off, he's going to be in for a long night.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because if he shoots, I think that Guida is just going to sprawl, get on top, and start to rain down some heavy ground and pound. So regardless, man, I'm interested to see if one of our guys or girls takes down the tournaments today. It's just I would label this card as just ugly, ugly in capitals. And if you're able to maneuver throughout, targeting that 8,100 fight, I think is a nice start because it just allows you so much flexibility. Paying for one of these studs at the top makes a ton of sense, and avoiding the duds because there are definitely volatile fights. But all in all, best of luck, everybody. And truly hope that you guys cash today. And if you don't have, luck in DFS, start live betting, start going fight by fight as the fights are going on. And you'll find out that that's a lot easier.
Yeah, live betting is a lot of fun. It's funny. They reached out to me last week. Like, hey, can you host the MMA live for lock? I said, oh yeah, I love MMA. I want to do it. And I looked at the fight card. I was like, oh boy, this is a brutal one. But it is what it is. There should be hopefully some fun fights. I mean, some of them are going to be a little bit rough, but there are going to be some live betting options. So, I hope you guys win some money. Even if I don't, I like seeing our subscribers win. It's a lot of fun. I might be hanging out in the Discord chat tonight, so you guys can roast me if my picks were terrible. I'll be there. Guys, I'll be accountable.
Shout out to Josh stepping up on short notice on an ugly fight card. So that's dedication right there. It's not like we got a nice pay-per-view and Josh is like, yeah, I'll fill in. I'll watch the nice pay-per-view coming up. No, it's this horrible, trashy card that we got that we have to break down and try to win some money on. So props to Josh. If you guys appreciate what we did, please hit that like button. And like we said, we'll be in the Discord, chiming in, going back and forth from fight to fight. And can't wait to see how it works.
Yeah. And I think is the UFC back next week. I don't know if they take a break before their next pay-per-view. Because I know their next pay-per-view is May 7th. There might be a card next week. I don't know yet. But if there isn't, well, there is. So
Rob Font against Marlon Vera headlining. And we got Jake Collier against Andre Arlovsky in the co-main event. So, I mean, a little bit better. I'm looking at it right now. It's fights at the apex, right? The quality of the cards at the apex aren't necessarily the best, but fights are fights.
Jake Collier, heavyweight co-main event. If you told me that a few years ago, I would have laughed. But man, that main event fight is pretty good. But yeah, so hopefully you enjoy the fights tonight. And I believe Jason will be back next week. So look forward to seeing that. And we'll catch you next week.